The moment I stopped being useful to my family was the moment they finally showed me who they were. My phone lit up while I was reviewing a relocation contract at my desk. I almost ignored it. I only checked because Daniel had called twice the night before. The message was short. "I'm quitting my job. You'll take care of us while I get things together." I read it once, then again, more slowly. There was no embarrassment in it, no request, no explanation. It was written like a notice already approved by management. My name is Vivian Carter. I'm 34 years old. I worked as a senior logistics manager for a pharmaceutical company in Chicago, and I had spent the last 10 years building a life no one in my family seemed to understand, but everyone felt entitled to use. Daniel was my older brother. He was 37, charming when he needed something, restless when he was expected to stay anywhere too long. By us, he meant himself, his wife Melissa, and their 6-year-old son. By get things together, he meant there was no plan yet. I stared at the screen and felt something unexpected settle inside me. Not anger, not guilt, just clarity. I typed 4 words, "Not my responsibility." I sent it before I could soften it. Then I looked back at the contract on my desk. Seattle. Senior Regional Director. Start date next Monday. Better salary, better team, and 3 time zones between me and every family emergency that somehow became mine. For 3 weeks, I had delayed signing because I knew what leaving would cause. My mother would call it abandonment. My father would call it selfishness. Daniel would call it betrayal. They all had different words for the same thing, losing access. I picked up my pen and signed my name. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voice memo from my mother. I pressed play. She said I was to come to dinner at 6 sharp because the family needed to discuss priorities. Her voice had that firm, polished tone she used when she wanted obedience dressed up as concern. I listened twice, then set the phone face down on the desk. For the first time in years, disappointing them did not feel dangerous. It felt overdue. At 5:30, I left the office for Naperville. The drive from downtown Chicago to Naperville usually took less than an hour, but memory can stretch any road. I knew what waited for me at that dinner table because I had been paying for versions of it most of my adult life. Daniel was older than me by 3 years, yet somehow he had always been treated like the fragile one. When he dropped out of community college the first time, my mother said he was too creative for classrooms. When he dropped out the second time, my father said college wasn't the only path to success. When he quit jobs every year or two, they called it ambition. When I stayed in one place and worked my way up, they called it luck. Daniel had a talent for looking promising right before consequences arrived. He leased cars he couldn't afford, bought watches on payment plans, and spoke about future business ideas with the confidence of a man who thought planning and doing were the same thing. If bills followed him, my parents blamed the economy. If people lost patience with him, they blamed jealousy. I learned early that no one was coming to rescue me, so I rescued myself. I took student loans, worked internships, and accepted jobs that paid less than I wanted because experience mattered more than pride. I didn't complain much. When Daniel's son broke his arm at school, I paid the hospital bill because a child shouldn't wait while adults argued over money. When Daniel's transmission failed 6 months later, I covered the repair so he could keep working. Both times he thanked me warmly. Both times my parents called me generous. What they meant was useful. After that, every crisis came with my name already attached to the solution. If Daniel was late on rent, I should understand. If he needed a bridge loan, I had stability. If I hesitated, I was cold. The text that morning hadn't shocked me because it was outrageous. It shocked me because Daniel finally said aloud what they had all believed for years. By the time I turned into my parents' driveway, I was done pretending I didn't hear it. My parents' house in Naperville looked exactly the way they wanted the world to see them: large brick exterior, trimmed hedges, polished entryway. Everything orderly from a distance. Inside, Tension usually sat closer to the surface. My mother opened the door before I knocked, as if she had been waiting behind it. She kissed the air near my cheek and said, "We're all in the dining room," the way someone might announce a meeting already in progress. Daniel was seated at the table with his arms folded. My father sat at the head of it. There was no food served yet, only water glasses and expectation. My mother began first. She said Daniel had been under unbearable pressure for months and finally reached a breaking point. She spoke about stress, toxic management, and how hard it was for young families now. Though Daniel was nearly 40, my father leaned back and added, "A man needs room to recover after a setback. Pride matters." Daniel sighed as if exhausted by all of us. "You wouldn't understand. People in corporate offices think everything can be solved with spreadsheets and lectures." I took my seat and let the silence stretch a little. My mother slid a folded notepad toward me. She had written numbers in neat blue ink. Mortgage, groceries, daycare, insurance. At the bottom was the amount they wanted. $3,000 a month. Only temporary, she said quickly, until Daniel gets stable again. I asked how long temporary meant. Daniel shrugged. "As long as it takes. Families don't put deadlines on support." My father nodded like that settled it. Then my mother moved to the real subject. "And about Seattle. I think you should postpone it. Your brother needs family nearby right now. This isn't the time to run off chasing another promotion." Daniel gave a small smile into his water glass. He thought the room had already closed around me. He had seen guilt work too many times to imagine anything else. I looked at each of them in turn. No one had asked whether I wanted to move, what the role meant to me, or what I had built to earn it. They had skipped straight to redistribution, so I said nothing yet. Sometimes people reveal the whole plan if you let them keep talking. When no one spoke for a moment, I reached into my bag and placed a manila folder on the table. My mother's face tightened immediately. She knew me well enough to understand I hadn't come unprepared. I opened it and slid the papers into the center one by one. The first was a receipt for the $2,000 I paid when Daniel's transmission failed last year. He had promised to repay me in 3 installments. He never made the first one. The second was a bank transfer for 1 month of rent I covered after he transitioned careers, which meant he quit another job without a plan. Then came printed screenshots of job listings I had sent him over the past 6 months, warehouse supervisor roles, operations coordinator roles, decent positions with benefits. Beside each was his response beneath me. "Not enough money. Wrong title. Bad commute." The last stack was the easiest to obtain. Public receipts from delivery confirmations, payment screenshots Daniel had bragged about online, sports betting deposits, and a pair of designer sneakers that cost more than some families spend on groceries in a month. I folded my hands and looked at him. Why quit before securing another job? Daniel's chair scraped sharply against the floor as he leaned forward. "You brought paperwork to shame me. You really are that cold." "No," I said evenly. "I brought memory." My father slapped his palm lightly on the table. "Money shouldn't be tracked between family." I turned to him. "Then why is only my money remembered?" That landed harder than I expected. Even my mother looked away. Daniel's anger rose fast once sympathy failed him. He said I was obsessed with control, that I treated people like invoices, that I thought having a career made me superior. None of it answered the question. No one touched the notepad asking for $3,000 anymore. The numbers in front of them had replaced the numbers they wanted from me. The room went quiet in a way families hate most, quiet enough for truth to stay heard. The silence after my last question held for only a few seconds before my mother broke it the way she always did by changing the rules. "Fine," she said sharply, pushing the papers aside with 2 fingers. "If money bothers you so much, just let Daniel stay in your condo." I looked at her without speaking. My condo near Logan Square was a small 1-bedroom unit I bought 5 years earlier. I rented it on short leases and kept it well maintained because it was the first property I had ever purchased on my own. No one in my family had contributed $1 toward it. What condo, I asked, though I knew exactly which one she meant. My mother's voice softened, as if gentleness could hide theft. The Logan Square place. It's empty next month anyway. Daniel just needs somewhere stable while he gets back on track. I turned to Daniel. You knew about this. He hesitated, then shrugged. Mom said it was handled. I already boxed some things. That answer told me more than anger would have. He hadn't come to ask for help. He had come expecting keys. My father straightened in his chair. Families share assets when one member is struggling. That's how decent people operate. It is not family property, I said. It is mine. My mother flinched as if I had embarrassed her rather than corrected her. You have plenty, she said. One small condo, and you deny your own brother shelter. One small condo, I repeated. Funny how things become small when they belong to someone else. Daniel's face hardened. You'd rather let your nephew see me fail than help. No, I said. I'd rather let my nephew see an adult take responsibility. That was the first honest thing said about the child all evening. I finally understood why they had demanded dinner so urgently. The monthly money was pressure. The condo was the real objective. They had already promised away something they did not own, and they expected me to play along so no one would have to admit it. I closed the folder and stood up. No one is moving into my property, I said. Not for a week. Not for a night. Not by surprise. The room changed then. They realized I wasn't refusing money. I left my parents' house before anyone could restart the argument. My mother called after me from the hallway. My father said I was overreacting, and Daniel told me I'd regret humiliating family. I kept walking. Some conversations only exist to wear you down. Back in my Streeterville apartment, I took off my shoes, set my bag on the counter, and started making calls while my coat was still on. First was a real estate attorney I had used during the condo purchase. He answered on the second ring and listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said I needed to document everything immediately and remove any possibility of confusion. Second was the property manager for the Logan Square building. I explained that no one had permission to enter on my behalf, especially any relative claiming family approval. Third was the building security service. I requested updated entry codes and removal of old guest access settings. They confirmed the changes within the hour. Then I sent one short email to my parents and Daniel. It stated that Daniel had no tenancy rights, no permission to occupy or access the condo, and any unauthorized attempt to enter would be treated as trespassing. I kept the language plain because clear words survive arguments better than emotional ones. After that, I reviewed smaller ties I had ignored for too long, years earlier. Daniel had joined a family mobile plan under my account because his credit was poor. I had kept paying his portion because it was easier than discussing it. I canceled that line too. The apartment was quiet except for traffic far below the windows. I stood there for a minute and noticed my hands were steady. Sometimes the angriest people are furious because they were counting on access they never earned. Daniel called 3 times before midnight. I let it ring. My mother sent a message saying lawyers had changed me. That one almost made me laugh. No lawyer had changed me. Paperwork had simply caught up to the truth. Consequences moved faster than excuses ever had. Within 2 days, relatives began hearing versions of the story from different people, and for once, the facts were easy to compare. Daniel hadn't been laid off. He hadn't been forced out. He had quit voluntarily after arguing with a supervisor, then announced that I would carry the gap. He checked into a motel near O'Hare because the friends who loved him at cookouts suddenly had no spare room. He also returned the oversized truck he leased to look successful, paying an early termination penalty he couldn't afford. Pride is expensive when monthly payments come due. My Aunt Teresa called me that Thursday afternoon. She was my mother's older sister and usually avoided family conflict the way sensible people avoid ice in winter. I'm not saying this loudly, she told me, but you were right to stop enabling him. I thanked her more than the sentence required. That evening, Daniel called. I almost didn't answer. but curiosity still had some power over me. His voice was lower, flatter, stripped of the performance I had heard at dinner. He said he only needed 1 month. He said he had interviews lined up. He said he knew things had gotten heated. I listened until he ran out of softer wording for the same demand. I would help honesty, I said. I won't fund entitlement. Then he said, "You always think you're better than everyone." "No," I replied. "I just think adults should carry themselves." He hung up without another word. I stared at the dark screen afterward and felt no victory. What I felt was the first crack in a story my family had told for years, that Daniel always needed saving. And I was born to do it. 2 days before my flight, the front desk called just after 4 in the afternoon. The concierge sounded careful in the way people do when trouble is standing in front of them. "Ms. Carter, your family is here in the lobby. They're refusing to leave." I closed my laptop, took a breath, and went downstairs. My building on North Michigan Avenue was usually quiet, full of people who preferred privacy over community. Daniel stood near the security desk with my parents behind him. His face was flushed, his jacket half-zipped, his anger already in motion. The moment he saw me, he pointed across the marble floor. "You ruined my marriage," he shouted. "My son is asking why we're in a motel." "You did that." I stopped several feet away. The security guard, a broad-shouldered man named Marcus, shifted closer without making a show of it. My mother stepped forward with tears already prepared. "Vivian, enough punishment. Families forgive. Give your brother the condo keys and let everyone calm down." My father didn't bother with softness. "Stop this nonsense," he said. "Hand over the keys and act like a daughter." I looked at him for a moment. Daniel moved toward me again, words arriving faster than thought. He called me selfish, bitter, unnatural, the kind of person who cared more about property than blood. Marcus raised a hand between us, and Daniel stopped short. I spoke quietly, which made everyone else sound louder. "I did not ruin your family. I stopped financing your lies." The room went still in the uncomfortable way truth often creates. Then I looked only at Daniel. "Your son needs a father with discipline, not excuses." He stared at me as if I had struck him. Perhaps no one had said it plainly before. My mother turned on me at once, saying I was cruel. Daniel turned on her just as quickly, demanding why she promised the condo if she couldn't deliver it. My father, already red with embarrassment, snapped at Daniel. "Take a job and stop embarrassing us." That sentence shocked all of us most of all. Suddenly they were arguing with each other, voices crossing, blame changing hands in seconds. I didn't wait for the ending. I pressed the elevator button, stepped inside when the doors opened, and watched them through narrowing metal panels as their own noise swallowed them whole. I arrived at O'Hare before sunrise with 1 suitcase, 1 carry-on, and a level of tiredness sleep hadn't fixed. Airports have their own kind of silence, even when crowded. My flight to Seattle boarded at 6:40. I found a seat near the window and opened my phone one last time before takeoff. I blocked my mother's number first, then my father's, then Daniel's. I didn't do it dramatically or with shaking hands. I did it the way people lock doors at night because some boundaries are practical. I left 1 email address open for genuine emergencies, though I knew my family had always been creative with that word. A message arrived minutes later. It was from Daniel. I accepted a warehouse supervisor job in Joliet. That was all. No apology, no explanation, no mention of the motel, the lobby, or the years he treated rescue-like income. Just information, offered the way people hand over proof when pride is still alive. I read it twice and put the phone away. Part of me wanted more. Acknowledgement. Maybe. Another part knew I had already spent too much of my life waiting for others to become honest on my preferred schedule. When boarding began, I joined the line and didn't look back at the terminal. As the plane lifted through the gray morning and curved over Lake Michigan, Chicago spread beneath the wing in clean lines and cold water. The city looked smaller from above than the guilt I had carried inside it for years. By the time the clouds closed beneath us, that weight had begun to loosen. 6 months later, Seattle felt less like an escape and more like a life I should have chosen sooner. I slept through the night. I heard updates about Daniel through relatives who had finally learned to speak plainly. He rented a modest apartment in Joliet, kept the warehouse supervisor job, and had his son every weekend after Melissa left the marriage. Stability had arrived only after excuses ran out. My parents no longer volunteered my money, my time, or my property to anyone. Silence had taught them what arguments never did. One rainy evening, Daniel sent a short message. "You were right. I needed to grow up." I looked at the screen for a while. Some apologies arrive late and still matter, even if they don't repair everything. I replied with one sentence: "Take care of your son." Then I closed the laptop and watched the rain move across Puget Sound. If I learned anything worth passing on, it is this: helping family can be generous, but helping without limits can become permission for others to stay broken. Boundaries may cost you comfort in the short term, but they often save your peace in the long one. If you have ever had to choose between guilt and self-respect, you already know how heavy that choice can be. I know now which one weighs more.